Hey guys, it's Andrew here from Seemu Apps, and in this tutorial, we're going to look at creating charts in Swift. Okay, in order to create charts on iOS, and specifically a pie chart in this tutorial, we're going to use this charts library, which is one of the few libraries that we can actually use. And a great thing about this one is it's cross-platform in that it supports iOS, tvOS, and OS X. So the link in the description is down below. So we're going to use Cocoapods to install it. And if you haven't used Cocoapods before, check out my tutorial on Cocoapods. Okay, so I've created a new single view application Xcode project here. And in our terminal, we're just going to do pod init in that directory to create the pod file. Then we're going to open that with our favorite text editor. And the pod we're going to use is pod and charts. Once you're happy with that, save the file, go back to terminal and run pod install to install that pod. Okay, so now we've got our new Xcode workspace file, so let's open it up and create our pie chart. So first of all, in the project, head on over to the main.storyboard. We're going to go to the view controller scene, to the view controller, then the view in a hierarchy on the left side. And we're just going to change the background color here to gray in the right hand side. And the reason for that is in the objects, we're going to add a view, which is down the bottom here. Going to drag that on. Make it a square and let's move it close to the middle. Doesn't matter so much where it is because in the bottom we're going to use constraints. So first of all, make the width and height both 300 by 300 for this view. Add those two constraints. Then let's horizontally and vertically center it in the container. And that way this view will be in the center of our screen no matter what device we're on. It'll be 300 by 300 points height and width. And this is a view that's going to hide our chart. So with this pod installed, what we can do with the view, go to the identity inspector and under class, we can now, if you type in pie, you'll see pie chart view comes up here. So that's from the charts pod library installed, and you can see there's a number of other charts we can change it to. So select pie chart view. Then head on over to the assistant editor in the top right. We'll connect that up to our code and we're going to name the outlet pie view. So connect that up, close down the dual screens and go back to our view controller. So this pie chart view is referencing our pie chart. And you'll probably see in a second an error is going to come up. And that's because we need to import our charts from Cocoapods. So just import charts and that will go away once we have that import sorted out. Okay, so what we want to do, we want to create a new function called function setup pie chart. And we're going to run all the setup of the pie chart within this function here. So first of all, we're going to do pie view dot chart description question mark dot enabled equals false, because if we have that enabled, there's like a chart title which we don't really want to use right now. Do pie view dot draw hole enabled equals false. And if you set that to true, you essentially have a hole in the middle of the pie chart. So you have like this donut chart instead. So if you want to see that, set that to true. And there's other options within the documentation to actually set how big that hole is. We'll do pie view and you can set the rotation angle of where the rotation starts at. We're going to simply use 0 and we'll do pie view dot rotation enabled equals false, because you can make it so you can actually rotate the chart around. We'll do pie view dot user interaction enabled equals false. Because with this library, if you tap on a section of the pie chart, it will just explode it out for you. So if you want that functionality, you don't disable user interaction. But in this tutorial, I don't want that. And if you don't want the legend to show up, you do pie view dot legend dot enabled equals false. I'll just comment that out because we want the legend. And to get the actual data to put into the pie chart, we're going to create a new variable called entries. And that's going to be of the type pie chart data entry, which will be an array of them, and that's going to equal a new array which is empty. So whatever data we want to put into the pie chart, we put it in this entries variable here, and we do that by doing entries dot append, and in the brackets we're going to do of the type pie chart data entity, or sorry, data entry. And when you explode it out, you can see it's got a bunch of different options here. So it always needs a value. You can pass it a label. You can even pass it an icon and so on. So we're going to pass it a value and label. So my value is going to be 50.0. And for this one, we'll do takeout. So we're going to take the angle that our pie chart is going to show our breakdown on how much money in a week goes to where on what food. So I've got a few other options here. I'm just going to paste them in. So we can see we've got healthy food, which is 30, soft drink, which is 20, water, which is 10, and home meals, which is 40. So we've got 5 entries, which will show up in our pie chart. We put our values here and our label, and we're going to draw that. So next up, we'll create our data set. So we'll do let dataset equals pie charts dataset. The values, we're just going to check the entries, and label we'll just leave as blank. So some charts can have multiple data sets. Say you might have a bar chart, and each bar you might have 4 items represented for each season. Say the amount of shirts you're selling versus the amount of gloves, scarves, jumpers, and so on. In this pie chart example, we only need the one data set, so we create a new data set, the type pie chart data set, and just the entries value. So next up, we want to actually color these options. So I've got a color palette of purple, and to color it, we'll do let C1 equals NSUI color. And if you explode it out, you can just see here, you need to use this red, green, blue, and alpha. So this can be a bit annoying. So I'm going to quickly run you through creating an extension so we can initiate the colors from hex values, which is a lot easier. So let's comment that out. Actually, let's just delete it for now. Go File, New File. Let's create a Swift file. And we're going to name the file NSUI color plus hex. Create that. And we've got our extension here. So you will notice for some extensions, sometimes they name it just of the actual object they're extending only. Other times I'll put a plus and name the functionality they're adding just to keep it a bit more organized if you have a lot of extensions and you split it out into different types. So at the top, do import charts. Once again, we're going to do extension NSUI color. And we're going to create 2 convenience initializers. So the first one is convenience init. And this is going to take in red as an integer, green as an integer, and blue as an integer. And we'll do some checks here. So we're going to do asserts, and we'll do make sure red is greater than or equal to 0, and red is less than or equal to 255. Otherwise, if it's not in this range, it's an invalid red component. So we're going to do the exact same thing for green and blue. So I'll just copy that, copy green in, and so on. And essentially, this is a way that you can actually check the values of parameters that are being passed in when it's initialized. And if it's outside this range, it's an invalid color. So you can actually stop the code from running and throw up a warning so someone doesn't try to put in the wrong color essentially. And I just need to do a space after that greater than and equal to is for the 0. Alright, now that that's done, you do self.init, and in here you do red as CG float. You do red divided by 255.0. We do the same for green. And finally, the same for blue. Put in blue here, divided by 255.0. And finally, we set the alpha as 1.0. Okay, so that's our first convenience initializer setup. And this way, you can actually initialize the color by passing in the hex values for each red, green, and blue individually. But we're going to create another one where you pass in the whole hex value straight away. And to do this, we do convenience init. And just quickly, the alpha, I missed a colon right there. Okay, so for the hex one, we do convenience init once again, passing the hex value as an integer. And we'll do self.init. And we do red. And after red, we'll do hex. We're going to use bit shifting, which is essentially some low-level assembly operations, which you can do really cool stuff with. So essentially, this is just a really quick, simple way to create a hex value out of the integer we're passing in. And finally, blue. And for blue, we don't need to do any bit shifting. We just do the AND. Okay, now we're done. So this convenience init will allow us to initialize the NSUI color from hex. And we're just going to do product and build, because sometimes the autocomplete, if we've created a new extension, doesn't work straight away. So we just do that to make sure it's all good. So going back to our view controller now, we can do let C1 equals NSUI color. In the brackets here, we've got this new hex initializer that we just created. We're going to do 0x, which stands for hex. And after this, we put in a hex value. So do 3A015C, which is our first purple color. And we've got 4 more. So I'm just going to copy them all in here. And you can pause the video right now just to get those into your code. It's essentially a purple color palette with 5 different shades of purple. Now to use these colors, the first one's going to correspond to the takeout, the second one healthy food, and so on. We simply do data set that we created earlier, .colors, and we're going to pass it an array of colors. So C1, C2, C3, C4, and C5. And the order we pass them in is the order it gets placed into this entries array. So the first item in this entries array will get the first item in the colors array for its color in the pie chart. And the last one here is going to get the last color, and so on. Now, if you don't pass in the exact amount of colors that you have for dataset entries, it will just use the current colors you've passed in and rotate through them for the remaining ones that it doesn't have the color for. So it won't crash your app or anything like that. It will just attempt to use the colors you've already passed in. And finally, we're going to do dataset.drawValues enabled equals false. And finally, we'll do PyView.data equals PyChartData. Do dataset, not datasets. And we simply pass in the dataset we created. Now to initialize that pie chart in view did load, simply add setup pie chart to call that code. So let's run our app now and actually see the pie chart in action. Okay, so we can see we've created our pie chart in our pie view here. So we've got our home meals, our takeout, our healthy food, our soft drink, and our water, all divided up as per the data we put in. We've got the legend below. So just to show you, with that is user interaction enabled, if I comment it out, I just want to show you what the default is, which is quite frustrating because I think it should be set to false by default, but that's just my opinion. So you click on it, you can explode it out. And if you don't set rotation enabled, you can also touch the pie chart and make it rotate around the screen, and it looks kind of crazy. So we can see here with rotation enabled, commented out, we can rotate the pie chart around. So that's pretty crazy. And that's where that rotation angle value comes in. So if you wanted to start in a certain rotated way, say like you want to take out to start exactly like this, you could play around, get the rotation angle value, and then set it to that. So you can download the source code for this below. And just a few more notes. I just want to show you the actual GitHub page for the documentation. So it actually is based on this MP Android chart. And there's a link in here to the documentation. And essentially, because this library is based off an Android implementation, it points you to the Android documentation. Now, 90% of the options are exactly the same and work. However, there's a few things that are missing or are different. And the main one I'll show you is this is user interaction enabled, is actually set touch enabled in here. And this is because the pie view is inherited from UI view. So it inherits all its default functions and options. So do keep that in mind. The documentation, it's pretty decent. It's a bit all over the place and hard to search for things. But if you look up Swift pie chart to set something and you can't find it, look up the Android equivalent in MP Android chart. And if you can find it in there, it's implemented pretty much in the exact same manner. Okay, and finally, also there's a demo app which has a lot of example code for all the demo charts. So if we go into pie chart, it shows us a simple demonstration of the pie chart where you can set more values, change the options, and so on. But just a quick note, with this demo, the code is essentially a Rolls Royce. It's very well designed, very well crafted, has everything you can ever need. However, if you just need to build a Toyota Corolla and you're not familiar with building cars, looking at a Rolls Royce for an example to understand how to build your own Toyota Corolla is not that good. And that's part of the reason why I created this tutorial. So if we go to the code and we do a filter for pie chart, you can see we've got the pie chart view controller up here for Swift. And the code, it's great, but it's quite difficult to understand. It uses a lot of inheritance, a lot of I wouldn't say tricky, but it has very good coding standards. And because of that, you kind of have to trace through from this pie chart view controller It inherits from the demo-based view controller, so some of the options are in there. And because of that, it's not as simple as just looking in one class. To be able to copy that, build your own chart, and so on, and this demo-based view controller supports all types of charts. But I'll give you a hint, which I discovered, is if you search for the chart you want, so pie chart, and we search for tests, there's a test file within the actual charts library. And they have tests for all the charts. And this setup is super simple chart, which tells you exactly what you need to get going. So if you're making a chart, not too sure how to do it, it's not working, try and find the test file in a demo project, and it'll be a lot easier for you to get your head around it. It will be a super basic bare bone chart, but at least it will get you going. So you can download the source code for my demo chart in the description below. And be sure to subscribe, hit that bell button, and like this video for more tutorials. Catch you guys next time.